to our speakers.
كريم.
Ladies and gentlemen, and now we move on to the fourth session. And it's about media and its role in promoting knowledge about sustainable development. And it's a very crucial part of this Knowledge Summit of 2019. Maysoon Nwahid, the presenter in Al Arabiya TV channel, with the speakers Shahab Al Hamadi, director of Sharjah Media City Freezone Authority, Sarah Al German, general manager of Dubai TV, Nicholas Chatara Morse, CEO of Project Syndicate, Joanna Ben, editor-in-chief, the Nature Controversy, and this session would be entitled Media and its Role in Promoting Knowledge about Sustainable Development.
Of course, everybody knows how much media is important for everything in life. And of course, sustainable development is one of these things is important in our life. Our speakers here, they have very good experience with sustainable development and how we can help people to know more about sustainable development. Let's start with Ms. Joanna. She has a presentation now, and then we'll start our questions to Joanna and, of course, to Mr. Nicholas, Mr. Hamadi, and Sarah. I don't know, Isra, is it ready, the presentation for Joanna?
I think Nicholas is.
Yeah. Nicholas? Okay, we'll start with Nicholas. Isra, Nicholas or Joanna? Joanna. Okay. Yes, please, Joanna. Joanna, she will do the presentation about nature for climate, and she will talk about her experience, and then we start also the questions with our speakers.
Hello, everyone. Good morning. It's a pleasure to be here. A little bit about myself. I've worked for different non-profits in the environment sector for nearly 20 years now. I've worked on ocean conservation, wildlife trade, climate change, and I'm currently now working for an organization called the Nature Conservancy, TNC, and helping run this campaign called Nature for Climate, of which the Nature Conservancy is one of 13 organizations. This is all about how do we fight climate change through using nature. Probably a lot of you don't really know that one of the biggest solutions to climate change is actually how we use our natural resources. Here's a little quick graphic, what we mean when we talk about nature-based solutions, or you might also hear it called natural climate solutions. So if you look at the top of the graph, you have decarbonization of everything that goes on the planet, and then a third of the solution is actually nature at the bottom, the part in green. And very, very simply, because it can get very scientific, you can break it down into a few easy components. And really, it's all about how we look after our forests, whether we cut them down, whether we leave them standing, what we do with our farms. So the way we farm food is responsible for about 25% of carbon emissions, but if we actually change the way we farm, it can become what we call a sink for carbon rather than a source. And then around the ocean, things like mangroves and what we call blue carbon, so it's salt grasses and grasslands and those areas that just fringe between the land and the ocean. Those areas are really, really carbon dense. And the way we look after and protect all this can add up to a third of the solution by 2030 for climate change. So we knew that there was a problem. So here's a few little pictures, just to break it down to stuff that means something real to you in everyday life. This is what we mean when we talk about natural climate solutions. And it can even come down to, as you see on the last chart, what we eat, what food we waste, and the dietary choices we make. So what's this campaign about, and how does this relate to this session? This session is all about media and sustainability. So when we analyzed media before this campaign, we realized we had a problem. And the problem is that when everyone talked about climate change, no one was really talking about nature as a solution. So if you look at this chart, you can see the red line at the bottom. This is talking about climate change and nature. And then all the other lines above it were the kind of discourse in the media that people are more used to reading and writing and talking about. So for us, this campaign was all about, well, how do we elevate nature? That means, how can governments do more? How can they include it in their climate pledges? How can they actually make it part of their formal commitments to do a huge amount more and look after nature as part of this issue? So again, we're going to be talking a lot more about this. Media is also, of course, all about social media as well. We know there's over 1 billion Facebook users today, just as an example. And if you look at this, this is some analysis that we've done from the beginning of the campaign, and this is just over a couple of years. And you'll see that the conversation has shifted from what we call people that already talk about nature in that central circle to now how the conversation has spread and shifted. And it's really opened out, and it's really crossing across different parts of society and reaching different governments and audiences, which was our intention. Of course, it's an ongoing job. We're just partly into the campaign, but this is the kind of stuff we're tracking when we talk about media too. So I put this slide in. I'll try and break it down very simply. So this was at Climate Week in New York, which was in September. And yes, there was quite a lot of coverage around Climate Week and what was happening. But if you look at the blue bar, which is youth and public mobilization, that got the most media coverage. And if you ask why, it's probably quite simple. It was the school strikes, it was Greta Thunberg, it was really good, interesting news stories about how youth were mobilizing around climate change. So we can talk in the group about why that makes a good news story, why that got picked up and other issues didn't. But it's just some analysis about the kind of subjects that are getting picked up right now in this debate. Okay. So overall, there's a lot to be said about how we as NGOs can really influence media and the kind of tactics and motivations that we try and use. We will talk amongst us, we were talking earlier about how this is a partnership, and we'll certainly talk a lot more about that. But this is just some ideas about where we come from when we look at an issue that we think needs more media coverage, and then I can explain a bit more later about how we actually do that.
Thank you, Joanna. Joanna, great presentation. And of course, you have big experience with climate change. How has media changed since you have been working on sustainability?
Oh, big question. How has media changed? Can you hear me? Yeah. In 20 years, I would say it's become harder and harder to get stories into the media. 20 years ago, I was working at WWF, and I remember if there was a really good story with really good footage and photos, I could literally send a Betacam tape, the old-fashioned tape, put it in the post and send it to Reuters or AP, and if it had good pictures in it, it would probably run, and it would probably end up in the news bulletin the next week. This time, with Instagram, with all the social media, with everyone being a citizen journalist, with so much out there, it's actually a lot harder to get your issues covered, I think.
Thank you, Joanna. Mr. Shahabi, also in Shams, how you work with the sustainability development? First of all, what Shams is?
Well, thank you for having us. First, Shams is Freezone. We are Sharjah Media City. We're based in Sharjah. We do initiate lots of technology-related projects that helps media companies run their business. We focus on startups. We have lots of solutions that they can use right away the moment they start their business. We also invest in some technology companies where where we could provide such added value services for the others in the work community that we have in Shams. This is all related to Shams being part of the technology or of the internet based on servers or based on online usability. But Shams is also a 2-kilometer square city where we actually want to provide a city full of community working together and having place to live and work and have fun. That's where we started the initiation of all kind of projects that comes to do with sustainable development and sustainability in general. So we're focusing now on having to start with sustainable energy generation, where we can generate power using lots of projects, such as something called trigeneration. That's basically, you can look it up. That's something that has to do with making power using hydro storages as batteries and of course solar energy. And lots of other initiatives that we try to do in Shams started where with our policies and regulations, where we wanted to have standards that have everyone living in Shams follow, where let's say encouraging people to drive more electrical cars, for example, and use more of the sustainable power generated energy rather than the conventional energy power. So that's this is where we kind of started our strategy in Shams. Shams also is all about technology, as we mentioned, and I think media in general is going towards technology big time.
Yeah.
The idea of having a platform or platforms where media can do business online is cutting a lot of the resources used to create media and to create media businesses, such as the equipments usually used for media. I mean, media is kind of a very big industry where companies just use a lot of resources. So moving towards technology will cut a lot of the resources used to have those media companies run. And in addition to that, we will be saving lots of pollution happening in the environment, especially when it comes to satellites, for example, which is mainly used for media. We all know that satellites are now scattered up there in the sky, and it's getting crowded. And I think...
but we decrease expenses.
Well, that's...
This is important also.
Exactly. And I think what we've done in 50 years is actually multiplying year to year. So I think there is where the technology is going to help us reduce that kind of impact on the environment. So Shams is kind of trying to take all these aspects in its consideration when it builds a strategy of how media companies should run and how they can do business without harming the environment and without doing much harm to the ecosystem that we have in life.
Sarah, of course, she's CEO Dubai TV. Sarah, what is the importance of the media for achieving sustainable development?
Thank you for having me. Is it on? Hello. Yes. Thank you for having us, Maysoon, today. And I think it's an interesting group because each one's bringing in their own background and experience into this discussion. Obviously, media has a very important role, and if anything, it's the other half. So as much as we do with development and initiatives we do, if we're not shedding the light on them, people don't know what to focus on and where we are or keep tracking. If anything, at this point, I think media is extending relationships and partnerships with all initiatives in terms of policymakers, NGOs, in terms of governments, and even activists, just general people on the street, and people who want to make a change and work on development, and really partnering and gathering data from all of these people to be able to disseminate the information correctly. As media, I don't think our role is only about disseminating the information in a traditional manner. You know, it's easy to shed a light on climate change or gender inequality or any environmental issues, but I think what's very important for media right now is to speak and really trigger that person to take action and be involved. And that's where the role of media comes in, not just bringing us the news and what's happening and tracking really development, sustainable development issues and where we are. It's easy to know where we are, but what are we going to do about it? And I think that's the next step. And where we really touch, I think, people's hearts, or where we really touch them into the sense of what action needs to be done, I think it's when it hits home to them and when it feels it's very relevant. And the best way media can bring that, I think, on board is through storytelling. So not just through breaking news traditionally, but with social media, with documentaries, with engaging activists, even children, picking up coastal waste.
Sarah, who's giving more for sustainable development, the traditional media or the new media or social media?
I think it's more of an integration, but I think it's more it's definitely new media. Traditional media will tell you where we are. It will highlight the panels and the initiatives that are being done, but it does not call upon you as a human being to get involved. And with documentaries, when you see your neighbor, when you see your child, working on environmental issues, and all these children are actively lobbying and really advocating for such topics, your sister, your daughter or your son, they would want to be engaged, and it becomes more of an inspiration. I think it's the story, the narrative you approach sustainable issues is really how you start triggering the change. Mm-hmm. So that's where new media more comes in terms of social media. And I think there's a big example with, I don't want to get into politics, but Lebanon right now on social media. Mm-hmm. The traditional media of what's happening in Lebanon gives us perspective, but you just open social media and see what's happening there, mm-hmm. and how everyone's supporting and kind of advocating for mm-hmm. the cause. So definitely it's both, but I think it's the approach for mm-hmm. sure of how media brings it.
Nicolas now, he's the CEO of Project Syndicate. Also, he has a presentation about the media and the importance of media and sustainable development. Please, Nicolas.
So hello, can you hear me? Yeah. So just a little bit about myself quickly. I've been in the media space with Project Syndicate for about 20 years. And to just ground the conversation in a little bit of context, I want to tell you quickly about Project Syndicate because we're kind of a unique media entity that straddles a lot of the different themes we've been talking about. And then I want to very quickly tell you about an initiative that we just launched designed specifically to drive the conversation around sustainable development, sustainability, climate change, climate finance, all of the SDGs really in the media, both traditional and social media. So this is our mission statement. We are a nonprofit organization. We produce content. We produce opinion commentary content. And I would add just one thing to the comment about the power of social media and documentaries. Opinion commentary content is also very powerful. It's not news. It's somebody's opinion. You either agree with that opinion or you don't agree with that opinion. But it stimulates you to think about the issue. It's all fact-based. It's all grounded in science. But it really gets you to think. And what we are in this world to do is to ensure that everybody in the world has access to expert opinion content. We do that by distributing our content to a network of over 500 media outlets that we work with in 157 countries. So here in the UAE, if you pick up Al Bayan any day, you'll see our content translated into Arabic on the knowledge page. If you picked up a paper in the UK, you would see our content in The Guardian, and so on. Let's go to the next slide. So this distribution network that we've built, which spans 157 countries, I should also mention that we translate our content into 12 languages, and I think that's incredibly important. I mean, language is everything. We're all here speaking English. We had a conversation in the back, should we speak Arabic, should we speak English? The fact of the matter is, to reach readers in any given country, you have to speak their language. So we identified that very early on. We translate our content into 12 languages, and that's allowed us to grow this global distribution network, which in turn attracts very prominent people to write for us. whether that's Jean Manuel Santos, Nobel Peace Prize laureate, Joe Stiglitz, Nobel laureate, or someone like Shinzo Abe from Japan. Again, this is just a quick overview of some of the partners and papers and media outlets that we work with. And this is a look at the reach that we can achieve. So last year, we had 1 trillion articles appear in print newspapers. So we ourselves didn't write 1 trillion articles, but those articles were reprinted in 1 trillion newspaper copies around the world. So our ability to reach readers everywhere is quite immense. And what I would like to do next is go into an example of the initiative that we launched in New York during Climate Week, and show you a case study of some of the work that we've been doing with the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation that's designed to leverage our reach, to leverage our partnerships with media, to leverage our access to influential minds and experts, and leverage our ability to translate content and get content published in local languages to affect change. I mean, we're talking about how can media help us reach the SDGs and accomplish Sustainable Development Goals. If you think of a theory of change, it all starts with information, awareness, and understanding. And I think that's where media's role is. Our role is to help people through storytelling, through social media, through documentaries, through commentaries, help people understand the issues we're talking about, because the issues we're talking about are massive and they affect everybody. So we've been partnered with the Gates Foundation for 7 years, we've just kind of renewed our agreement with them. And our partnership here is designed, they support us to produce content by experts on a broad range of global public health and development issues. This is a snapshot of the last 4 years. We've been able to create 273 pieces of opinion commentary content, which have been published over 7,000 times in 131 countries and reached 800 million readers around the world. So this, again, it's about getting ideas out there. It's about sharing knowledge. It's about sparking awareness, getting people to think about the issues. Next, I want to tell you just a little bit about something that we just launched in Climate Week. I was delighted to see this topic because it's all about raising awareness of sustainability issues through media. So in New York, we launched, we had an event, you'll see a video in a second. We launched a magazine, which you see the nice, colorful, kind of funny cover on here. But the strategy and the communication strategy that went behind this, I think, is important. So this magazine was published in partnership with Barron's magazine in the US. If you're not familiar with Barron's, it hits the Wall Street investor group. It's a conservative publication. It's owned by Dow Jones, which is owned by Rupert Murdoch. They like Trump. They don't like climate change. So we were able to place content that is very opposite from what they would normally print to that demographic. Why did we do that? We wanted people to think about the issues. We wanted to expose them to content they otherwise wouldn't read through their normal magazine and get them to think about these issues. This magazine was focused on climate finance and green growth and green bonds and impact investing and ESG, all of the things that we're starting to talk about. So again, we targeted the information to the readers we wanted to receive it. In addition to this content is being sent out to our distribution network. And this is a snapshot of the last 6 months or so of where this content has been published around the world. You can see the UAE has published more than 48 articles that we've found. There's a huge appetite for this type of content, not only in the UAE and all of these countries you see, but globally. And it's our role as media to get those ideas and issues in front of these readers. So that's it. There's a video behind this, and I'll end there. How do I click the video? Video. Maybe there's no video.
It's okay. Thank you, Nicolas. Nicolas, we saw now this project, Syndicate.
Our purpose here is simple. That is to act on climate and to act on sustainability. It is an occasion for international reckoning as to what our various national governments are doing or not doing.
On the one hand, we must recognize that it's moving in the right direction, but we should not fool ourselves. It's still very small. We have to move from goodwill to a redesign of the system.
Humanity is at a crossroads.
Anything that is linear, progressive, gradual, or incremental just doesn't cut it anymore.
Basically, the countries with heavy fossil fuels are stuck.
We can do differently. But you know what? We also must do differently.
The single most encouraging thing in global climate change action has been the rolling mobilization and consciousness changing of the corporate world.
At the same time, we are beginning to see change.
And millions of young people around the world are protesting against political and business leaders that are too slow.
What matters is what we're doing from now on.
Welcome to the future.
Thank you, Nicholas. When we watched this video and when you talked about Project Syndicate, there is a question about the importance of visions and the strategies to build a culture about sustainable development. How much is important that?
I think it's super important, and I would guess the way that I would answer that and the way Project Syndicate answers that fits into the mold of what we do in terms of content. We're very focused on our content creation, but underlying that, what we always try to do is take an expert. I'm not an expert in sustainable development, but we connect expertise, whether that expert is a scientist, an activist, a climate financier, or a youth activist like Greta Thunberg. We want to connect their knowledge, their opinions, and their ideas with the global public. Mm-hmm. And we do so, again, in an opinion commentary format, so that the reader at the end of that piece of content is stimulated to think about the ideas. They may agree, they may disagree, but they're thinking about it. And that's the first step towards awareness, understanding, and then we want to move towards action.
Mm-hmm. Joanna, we are talking about social media, about traditional media, and about the importance of media. How has the digital world changed now, how we consume news? We talked, we need stories, we need documentaries, but there is a change.
So if it's okay, I'm going to jump in on Nicholas's question a little bit because it's related. You know, we talk about a vision, and I'm going to be a little controversial here and say, this is our world, this is the world we're living in. Sustainability shouldn't be something outside of news, it shouldn't be something different. You know, I could rattle off a list of terrifying statistics now about sea level rise, about global temperature changes baked into the environment, which you may or may not know from having seen some of the latest UN reports. But you probably have seen the wildfires in Australia and koalas falling out the trees. And you've probably seen the wildfires in California. And you've probably seen the droughts and floods and extreme weather events that are happening more and more frequently. And probably the idea that half the fish you eat is now farmed because, you know, we've also exploited so much of the ocean. So there's part of me that thinks this is our world. So why are we even talking about it being a separate issue? So my vision would be that in the same way that governments talk about sustainability and the environment in every decision they make, you know, when they're funding roads, or we're looking at resources, or we're looking at building schools, or how we feed a population, that it's how we live. And in the same way, I think, you know, the news does have an obligation to actually look at causality. So when it's talking about wildfires or extreme levels of things happening, it doesn't say, oh, this might be climate change. It actually goes, it is climate change, you know, and actually take that stance and just say,
it's a global thing.
It's happening. So, Yeah, I mean, I can give you some examples even of how recently, you know, news organizations were very nervous to even say whether something was caused by climate change, and already a year on, they're like, it's climate change, you know. So, you know, how we're consuming news, I think that's secondary to what should be in it, really. I agree with what Sarah was saying, that the social media gives us the live access, the real opinions, the drive, the passion, the people and the stories. But I'd like to see that mainstreamed as well. And for when when my organization or any organization I work for has something really important to say, much as I love working with Project Syndicate, I would also love it if the New York Times could pick it up in a heartbeat, because it's important and people should read about it. So that would be my vision.
Mr. Shihab, how Shams promote the culture of sustainable development?
Well, first, there are some initiatives we've started in training people for multi objectives. Actually, we do have a training system in place where we can educate people about many aspects of the business and of the economy. One of the main programs that we have is how to create a sustainable business and have a much less effect on the environment. This is and it is fully funded by Shams, and we do believe that this is how we could serve the community. We also have a lot of initiatives that we promote ourselves for the companies, and telling them this is what Shams does, so you could do what we believe in and what Shams actually represents. This is one way of educating people. We do afterwards, of course, we need lots of initiatives from the other medias. We, as part of Sharjah Media Council, we do communicate with the other media entities in Sharjah, where they can promote and have more initiatives in their programs and in their talk shows regarding sustainable development and sustainable energy in general. And we do have lots of initiatives from the other authorities. I think similarly happening everywhere else in the Emirates, but we try to adopt those technologies and systems and try to implement them in the city. So this is one way of us being part of the indirect impact on the community, where they can actually be part of this initiative in general.
Sarah, is the Arab world ready for the responsibility of change, transformation, and development?
I think, yes, definitely. We're definitely getting there. I'm putting more hope in the younger, the millennials. What we've seen with them is definitely they're more tech savvy, they're more interested, they stand up for themselves. So they've already got those tools, set up in terms of being able to make change. But what we've also noticed is they don't have much fear, which is quite interesting, because maybe the older generations, there's a little bit of a different mindset related to sustainability now, but you've got those fresh young millennials, let's say, and they don't have much fear in terms of what if and what could happen, and they are ready for that mind shift, and they're ready to go out. And there's actually a very big percentage of them, you would find them are even teenagers, and these are going out and they're picking up waste from coasts, and they're doing so much, and they ask and they want to help. So the Arab region, as we have been witnessing, as I said, right now with the situations around us, and the region is quite fragmented, but you see a lot of the youth are out there in the streets and they want change. And I would speak probably on a UAE as well, focus in the region. We're quite, lucky that we've got an infrastructure and we've got the policies are in place. So we've got incorporations that are promoting sustainability, whether it's in renewable energy in Abu Dhabi. You've got sustainability is a big topic in the Expo 2020 file, coming up with the sustainability pavilion. You've got the astronauts that we've just launched to space, obviously. So we're also looking into the space field and how what's sustainable in terms of life after that. So there's a lot, the infrastructure is there, I would say, in the UAE, and it's media's role really to kind of come hand in hand and engage the community and the young in these topics and how they want to evolve in it. So I would say yes, definitely, especially with the younger, there is for sure.
Nicholas, are we able to create a new media model as a platform for global sustainable development? You have platform.
Yes, we have one, but you know, it's small if you're thinking of the globe. That's a big question, and I think I don't have the answer, but I think one of the things that we have to really accept if we're talking about the media and a global platform is that the media is struggling. The business model that has supported the media forever has been radically disrupted, starting 10 or so years ago with the rise of social media and Facebook and Google and just the changing behavior of news consumers. So we have hope that media can help drive the sustainable development goals forward and raise awareness, but yet we're pinning that hope on an industry that is struggling and that's in decline. So I think if we're thinking about a global platform, we have to think about partnership. And I mean, to hear some of the things that are happening in Shams is wonderful, like this support, and, direct or indirect, this technical support, financial support, whatever it may be, that helps and supports media grow and do their job is absolutely needed. I mean, we are a nonprofit organization and we're very proud to have launched this initiative, but we couldn't have done it without support. And that support came from business, it came from NGOs, the Nature Conservancy, it came from foundations and so on. So I think we have to think of the media ecosystem as something that needs to be interconnected, and there needs to be partnership, and we need to really put energy into that if we want to have an impact.
Joanna, there is a priority in every country, or the sustainable development is global, and the media should work the same in all the countries and in all the categories and the fields.
So there's that very famous phrase, from local to global, and it applies, I would say, to the media as much as sustainability. When we're looking at some global issues on the world stage, whether that's how we govern the ocean, and there's a big treaty coming up next year, which could be one of the most important environmental considerations that's ever happened, in the last few decades. That's a global issue that has to be negotiated at the UN. But it will impact every country differently. So how it would be reported locally. It will affect Taiwan differently, till it will affect Dubai, to the EU, to the US. But all countries will be affected, and I would say it's the same with a global issue like climate change. How different countries respond to it, what they can actually do, how Africa as a continent is going to respond compared to this region or Europe is fundamentally going to be different. And the media should respect that and look at what can be done. But I think it's important that there is this sense of collaboration that we've spoken to. We need the stories from Africa over here in the same way that we need the technology and development from here explained globally and cross section. Plus we need to get, I do want to say, in NGOs and a civil society perspective, because we do fill a gap that isn't really covered otherwise. So long answer to your question, no, of course it's not homogeneous. To the same point that Nicholas was making, we need to translate concepts and ideas to audiences so that people can consume them in a way that works for them, but they are global issues. And I think it's important that we recognize we're one global community trying to save our planet.
Mr. Shihab, how can sustainable development goals be reflected in the media infrastructure in the country?
Well, as we all know, education is is the main driver of change in every community. And we believe that the education system here is actually coping with all the changes that are required for the environment and for all kind of development needs. But the thing about education is it's targeted to the new generation, the generation that is not yet there in the market, and the main players in the market are the business owners who long time have finished their education. So this is not going to be directed to them directly. So what we're thinking of is that raising awareness for those individuals would be through media, and this is the only way that we can affect and change their ideas and perspectives about the nature and about the ecosystem. So what we need to do is to have some more regulations and some more policies regarding how to do business and how to affect how to make the business less harmful to the environment. So in the setting the objectives of every strategy for countries all over the world, there have to be a direct driver for media companies and media owners to actually inject their messages and their content with that kind of initiatives, that kind of messages for all the age groups, where people can just repeatedly hear over and over and again, this is what's happening to the environment and this is where you can make a difference. So I think the moment we start putting those kind of objectives for media, and I'm not going to say force the media because it's majorly private entities, but at least make media people believe more into this, then they will drive their media institutions to have more to have more sustainable, friendly, let's say, messages and way forward. So driving the media is kind of what would make change happen faster. Of course, as Ms. Sarah mentioned, social media is now taking over the regular medias in general. And I think we could start over there. I think the idea of having the governments and the global initiatives focusing on social media and focusing on people or individuals who other people are actually following and listen to, I think it will have much major impact on how they think. The idea overall of delivering those messages and embedding them in the community and the society by raising awareness is what drives people to use the other initiatives that the government are implementing. For example, we have the municipalities here everywhere. I think in the Emirates have the dustbins, for example, categorized in a way, but not everyone is using them in the same way they have to, because the awareness was not there. They don't know what is this for and how is this going to help. So this is what we need to do first. We need to educate people of how important this is. Then we need to start the initiatives that make this actually work.
Sarah, do you cooperate with the government regarding the sustainable development, the programs that you want to do? Yes, the cooperation with the government, how much is important also? And do you do it as TV?
Yeah, of course. Being Dubai TV, obviously, government channel, we have a huge role in terms of endorsing all the initiatives done in the UAE, in a sense of partnering up with them, being really the media arm to create awareness, create campaigns all around, traditionally, socially, on all the initiatives that are happening. But what we do is also we take a lot of the stories that are going around. So we've got, for example, Renewable Energy Summit coming up in Abu Dhabi, and they've got many people, many activists, and they've got many representatives from the UN coming in. I'm not sure if Greta's coming in as well, but it's bringing those people in and bringing them on the media panel and giving them a voice and showcasing to everyone really in town that this is what's happening in the country, and we're supporting and we're advocating it. I think another role as well, important just to kind of jump into that point I remembered, was the celebrities as well, in terms of champions of change. There's a lot of people, when they see their celebrities, are endorsing specific causes. I know Leonardo DiCaprio, for example, is very big with the environment. You could correct me if I'm wrong. So you get credibility when you see how much they're passionate about that topic. And then when you see that it is sort of important to someone that you really admire and you look up to, it becomes also kind of important to you. Not just on terms of champions of change, but also regular people. there was an example of a story I read the other day. In the Philippines, I don't know if you're aware of that story. So they had issues with waste on the coast. It was an environmental issue, and nobody really cared. The media always talked about it. There was no action. So what they did, they brought in students, little kids, children, picking up the wastes, and they started distributing these videos in schools and buses and literally petrol stations everywhere. It went viral all over. And then I think people woke up and realized that this could be our children's future, and these are our kids and our neighbors' kids. So I would assume the government here's role is obviously to support these campaigns and to support people to go out and do what they need to do and give them that platform. So it's a kind of like a 360 circle, absolutely. But you need to understand the socio-cultural aspects of the government you're working in. Not speaking specifically about the UAE, but if you're talking about the MENA region, it's fragmented. Each country has its own cultural aspects. It has its own belief systems, mindsets. So,
Culture.
Absolutely. So I think as a media, you need to understand if you're talking about poverty, let's say, how are you going to be tackling that? There's also a statistic that says a lot of countries who unfortunately have a high percentage of poverty, some of them have a high percentage of corruption. So as media, how do you tackle that? Do you just bring it to the table, or do you start working on changing mindsets, start shifting, encouraging best practices of business? How do you work? And so you start from there, you start from the grassroots really, and you proceed from there.
Nicholas, with the presentation, you talked about obstacles and problems. What's the problems that faced media with this global thing, the sustainable development?
Sure.
And how we can solve it, if you have a vision of this.
Solve it, I don't know.
It's the same question for everybody now. It's the last question for everybody.
How many people know all the SDGs, all 17 of them? I don't. Most people don't. There's an old journalism saying, if it bleeds, it leads. If the story is shocking and terrible and dramatic, then that's what you're going to go, that leads your coverage, because it grabs attention, it grabs eyeballs. Media generally is a business, and that business is run on attention, whether that's attention minutes for advertising on radio or TV, or whether it's clicks for advertisements online, or number of print copies. So as a business, global business, media prints things, covers things that supports their business. And sustainability, I hate to say it, it affects all of us, but it's not what's selling newspapers. It's not what people are clicking on. It's much easier and more entertaining to click on something that's not quite so serious or heavy. So, I mean, this is an issue. We have to accept that media is run as a business, and there is a gap because we know that media is the platform and needs to cover these issues and is the part of our, interconnected world that can drive forward change and raise awareness. But yet they won't do it without support or until it's too late, until there are fires in Australia, until sea levels are rising. And frankly, I mean, it's probably already too late to really stop climate change, and we're just now starting the conversation. So we need to realize that it's an emergency, and we need to activate resources, and we need to activate ourselves to do more.
Mm-hmm. Joanna, the obstacles that you faced.
So 2020 is being called a year of emergency by a lot of think tanks, NGOs, and even some governments are coming on. The latest reports we've had show exactly that we're on, in the middle of the sixth extinction. 1 million species are predicted to be extinct very shortly through the latest UN report. The ocean report that came out recently in climate change is absolutely terrifying. And so is what was called the 1.5 degree report, the difference between if the global temperature rises to 2 degrees or 1.5. But to Nicholas's point, what's the problem with it all? It's complex. It's really, really hard science. There are some headlines, they get coverage for a few days, and then people go, right, covered that story, we've done it now. But we haven't done the story. We're only just beginning to tell the story, and the solutions are also incredibly complicated, and they require multilateral agreements. They require governments doing some really difficult things. They require companies and corporates probably probably not making any money for a few years while they would maybe, change their entire supply chain and work out how to do things differently in the long run that will be sustainable and will be long-term profit-making. But there will be some hard decisions that need to be made, probably in the next decade. And that's a difficult and unpleasant story to tell, and it's not daily headlines. So everything, yes, I think people have to be in it for the long term. They have to understand that this is a complex subject to cover, but it is our world, it is our life, it is future generations and everything on the planet. So we have to find a way of telling that story in a compelling, daily sense. I mean, Greta Thunberg says, why isn't this front page of the paper every day? And I actually agree with her. It should be, but then we'd all get bored and go, yeah, we know that. So there is an issue between the concept of news, which is breaking stories, and the concept of telling the narrative of what's happening in our world. That's challenging.
Mr. Shihab Shams, she did a lot with the organization, institution, and with the government. Do you have any solution for these obstacles that they face, the media face it, actually?
Generally, I think the collaboration between the government and those small entities, it's what is going to drive this forward. The idea of having individuals working hard to deliver a message or to change the culture of a community, I think this is going to be so hard if they don't get enough support and fund to run, because after some time they will just say that's enough, it's whatever we could do we did, and I think that's where everything is going to I don't want to say fail, but it's actually failing. So the idea of the government taking over those kind of initiatives is going to drive everything towards the objectives of those. I've seen lots of small groups trying to make change, and of course it's a good start, but the moment the government sees that, they should actually take over and say, yes, we're in, we're all in, we'll support you, and we'll fund you if you need any more funds. If when it comes to Shams, of course, this is one of the things we're trying to focus on, but of course it's kind of more into government initiatives and overall federal government initiatives rather than just a small authority jurisdiction. So I think what they need is funds, what they need is marketing, what they need is government saying, yes, we are actually sponsoring them. And I think this is where those small initiatives will take place in the future.
Sarah, there is war in the world, there is revolutions, and these are the headlines on TV. When the sustainable development should be the first headline in the news? Is it the right time now?
If we wait for the right time, it's not going to come. I think it definitely is the right time. As you know, my fellow panelists said, the urgency of the matter, people are not really aware of what's happening, but it's happening all around us. But we're just so busy and focused on the little bubble that we're in, and we're not really paying attention to the bigger red flags that are happening. So I would say in our region specifically, because obviously with some turmoil happening at this point, I think people are depressed of listening to all the bad news and the decision-making that's not specifically in the best interest of people. And people want solution-driven answers. So when you come in and you shed a light on a topic, well, we have a problem, so what are they supposed to do about it? But when you come with an approach, so this is the problem and these are the solutions, bring in solution-driven approaches and narratives to people, and they will want to jump on that. So I think it's the package of how you're delivering it. That's, again, the role of media. So how are we delivering that message to the young or old or whoever is interested, but they need to know the urgency, how it affects their lives today, how it affects the lives of their children tomorrow. And more than anything, it's and bringing it in a way where, yes, there is hope, and this is what you need to do. And once they know that they could even just a small participation, whether it's crowdfunding or whatever it is that they need to do, whether it's even just going out there and picking up waste or helping with water preservation, they will know how much a little impact will be able to help. So yes, it is the right time every day. Yeah.
Thank you, Sarah Al-German, General Manager, Dubai TV, and of course, Mr. Shihab Al-Hammadi, Authority Director of SHEMS, and Joanna Ben, Editor-in-Chief, Nature for Climate, and Nicolas Chatara-Moore, CEO, Project Syndicate. Thank you so much. Thanks for the audience.